This conference will now be recorded.
Okay, so for those of you that just logged in, I was talking with Greta about the issue of telehealth. I don't know who came up with that term, and I think I shared with you. I reiterate to her that right now probably 70% of my business is via phone or some kind of video platform, and since I'm not with an agency or anything like that, I don't, maybe I should, but I don't really have a concern about HIPAA issues because I don't know that there's anybody, well, I know, and unless somebody somehow is hacking into my, maybe I'm the only one on the screen here. Hang on just a second, guys. Let me open up something here. I mean, I don't know that anybody's hacking into my cell phone to listen to a conversation that I might be having. Now, I guess theoretically somebody can hack into a video call or something, and so maybe that's the issue. But I don't really know about that. Does anybody else have any awareness of what the issues are or the technology around that? I know it's a good way for some entities to say that they're going to make some money off of this, by
Right. I
doing
mean, Chris, this is David. Beyond what I was just saying, I'm not sure what it is. It's something to do with I think the way, at least in Oregon, that through the board of Oregon Board of Licensed Professional Counselors and Therapists says you must use the most current technology, whatever that is. So whoever comes out with the latest greatest thing that they say is the latest and greatest. I mean, we're not in that field, so we don't know what those things actually are.
Right. Okay.
But so for right now, that platform I was mentioning, which is VIDYO Video, which one of the people on the call, or at least she was, Carol, are you there? Let's see. Carol's there. So Carol at Community Counseling Services, Community Counseling Solutions, they use that platform. And it's
what is it?
VIDYO.
Oh, okay. VIDYO. Yeah, I mean, what I do know, I mean, I have a client whose wife works for works for Zoom, which is one of the big platforms. And these are people who are highly committed to the secure networks on their platforms. If they're wanting businesses, I mean, they're having businesses and that sort of thing use their platforms, they don't want anybody else listening in. So they have all kinds of encrypt, it's built in. So,
right.
All right. So that's one issue. I guess the other question that Greta and I were talking about is, and I know maybe if you all weren't online, just to repeat this, is with the drug and alcohol agencies, obviously, people have to come in because you're not going to have somebody do a UA over the phone or by video or anything like that. So there's a pragmatic issue, but there's also I mean, I've been a clinician for next year, it'll be 40 years. And there was a time where I couldn't imagine, except maybe for a brief contact, that you don't see, you're not sitting in the same space with the people you're working with. And I think I've shared this with you guys, but when I moved back home to Austin from the Chicago area 3 years ago and pulled the plug on an active private practice, I thought, how am I going to have a practice here? I'm known in the community. I've got a big referral network and, I just don't know. So it was kind of for me, a leap into the deep end without knowing. And the reality is I'm doing okay. That probably 70% of the work that I do today is with people by phone and video, even times with people here locally in Austin where they get jammed up or something and say, can I call in instead of coming to the office? And I say, sure. And what I've discovered for myself that's been a nice surprise is that I think my work is as effective over the phone and video, mostly phone, not much video. It's as effective as seeing people face to face. And there's times where people in some ways are a little bit more revealing. There's almost a degree of anonymity. I think, as I'm sure there's some people doing some studies about this right now. So my question to you all is, separate from the institutional and the HIPAA platforms and that sort of thing, are any of you all doing any work with your clients over the phone? And are you open to that, or do you run into any barriers inside of yourself to doing that?
Chris, this is Carol. Yeah. This is
Hey,
Carol with Community Counseling.
Yeah.
We have started because we have video and a thing called Polycom if somebody's in the office, to being open to seeing more people by video. I really have liked it. In fact, our state criteria person has okayed if a person signs a paper stating that they understand that even Skype is not guaranteed confidential, if they are willing to use it. I sometimes see people, whether it's mental health or gambling, over the phone or over Skype, and
okay.
So I see them right from their homes, and I kind of like that because I'm seeing them in their own environment, and I can still see, whether they've got any kind of, psychomotor agitation or anything like that.
Right.
But, it really has worked out good. Some people don't like it, so I see them in an office. Some people with gambling want to see me in a cafe, whatever is their comfort zone. But I have found that it is working quite well to do it either through the video or Skype.
Great. What about phone?
I personally, I've done some phone. That to me is harder because I can't see them. I can't get any kind of idea of what they're doing and how they look when they're talking to me, like you do a little bit more in the office. But I'll do it if that's their need for the time.
Yeah.
But it isn't nearly as often as I do with the Skype or video.
Okay, so just kind of a response to that. I've historically been notorious for being a terrible person to talk to on the telephone, because I just historically I just kind of sometimes I've been accused of saying goodbye to somebody when they're in mid-sentence wrapping up, because I haven't liked it. Well, what's happened, and I'm still not crazy about just kind of having a chit chat over the phone. I'd rather be face to face. What I've discovered personally, interestingly, and I'm a very visual person, is that actually working with people over the phone has in some ways made me, I think, a better clinician. And people say, well, how do you, how can you really do that without being able to see somebody? And I say, well, visually impaired people seem to figure out a way of doing it.
Right.
So what it does, what I find that it does is if I don't have my eyes to get that, valuable information by looking at somebody and the change of expression and how they're carrying themselves, what I've discovered is that I can see that with my ears. I can. And what it does is it forces us to kind of develop maybe one of our, from neurolinguistic programming, those of you who are familiar with it, what Bandler and Grinder identified is that we all have primary representational systems, either visual, auditory, or kinesthetic, and all the combinations of that. And so what it does is it invites you to, literally, if you're talking to somebody on the phone and you don't have the visual cues, it invites you to become a more refined listener. And I've discovered that I can really begin to detect nuances in people's language and tone of voice and inflection and what they're talking about. I can't do a side by side. I don't know the same person, same situation. And I'm sure there's some stuff that I'm missing, but I would also say that if I have somebody sitting in front of me, there may be some stuff that I'm missing auditorily, because I'm paying attention to the visual. So I guess what I'm saying to you is there are a lot of people that, if they're comfortable with video, then that's great. But I've got a number of people that prefer the phone. And it works, in my experience, it works just as well. So be open to that.
That's a good way of looking at it. Thank you. I certainly will, get out of my own little paradigm there and remember this and try to listen better. Thank you.
Part of the trigger, by the way, when Greta and I were talking before a lot of you guys signed on, she was saying with the helpline, there's people who are either texting in for help. Some of it may just be a request for, where's the nearest therapist. But what I understood her to say is that there's people actually having some conversations via chat and via text. And so I think all that, did I understand you correctly, Greta, with that? Maybe she's
Yeah, I was saying that we have the option with our helpline that people can text and chat. They don't just have to pick up the phone call and call the helpline.
Okay. So that all what that's affirming for me is that in this day and time, people are much more comfortable with that as a means of communicating, and that I think as clinicians, we'd be aware of that and how do we adapt ourselves to those kinds of shifts. I'll be honest with you. I think as a clinician, there's times where I really like being able to talk to somebody on the phone as opposed to have them in my office sitting face to face. It's a different kind of energy, and it's a bit of a shift. It's a shift in energy, and it's a break. So, and you guys know that too. Is there anybody else that has anything to throw in on this particular issue that we're talking about?
Hi, Chris. This is Raul Delao.
Hey, Raul.
Yeah, and see, here at Mergence, we have the GEAR program, which is a home-based program. It's gambling evaluation and reduction program.
Okay.
So my role in this program is an on the phone counseling. And my role in this is that there is a lot of in Latino community throughout Oregon that do not have the resources, or there's no cultural or language appropriate services available in their area. So we've been working for many years on the phone counseling, and I do agree with you with all that. Being able to talk to someone over the phone, it really increases your ability to perceive things that you may not be able to do when the counselor is present.
Okay, so you've discovered that.
Yes.
Okay.
And then the other part to that is that there's a lot of shame and all across the board, but with the Latino community, specifically women, it's really it's very shameful admitting to having a gambling problem.
Right.
So by being able to keep that piece of anonymity, being anonymous. Yeah. It does help them open up much better. And yes, so just wanted to make a comment on that.
See, that's a really powerful statement, because there's I mean, there's other communities that have tremendous shame and are resistant, if you will, or not coming in to seek help. And so it seems to me what I really heard you say is the availability of people connecting by phone is a way of bypassing that shame that they have, you know, because the nature of shame is it demands we stay in hiding. So,
Right.
so there's that thing of if I'm talking to somebody on the phone and I don't have to remember that the shame is I'm hiding my face. And so it's that interesting thing is I can both hide my face and reveal myself at the same time.
Yes.
And that's really cool.
Yes,
Chris,
it is.
Yeah.
are you speaking about mainly, and also Raul, I think, the name? Are you guys speaking more about people who are calling in that have not actually been seen already? Because I can see where the phone would be really good for them, but I'm not sure how you do your assessment and stuff with that.
Yeah, there's a system in place where we make a first contact and then we send out a packet with forms that they need to fill out, and then, you know, give a consent and all of those things. And then we set up in sort of an intake over the phone, and then we go from there.
Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I can see where that type would work, but most of mine I've already seen in office, and so there is not, I don't think, a need for anonymity.
Right.
Although, you know, over the phone, if I need to blow my nose, it's not quite as embarrassing. Sorry.
But you know, Carol, that's interesting because there are people that I have seen face to face that now the majority of the contact is via phone, like some of my people in Chicago that I still work with. But also I have people that I've never met face to face.
Yeah.
And you know, I have a very, very, really good working relationship with some people that I've never and may never meet face to face because they're in another state. You know, they're
Gotcha.
1,000 miles away or whatever it happens to be. But it's a little bit different if you've seen them face to face. But I don't think at the end of the day that really matters.
Okay. Well, community counseling is a little different, I think, because we have 4 counties in Oregon. We have offices. We have mental health. I do the gambling. There's A&D. There's peers. There's QMHAs. There's we have 2 facilities that are locked, one for long-term and one for acute and subacute. So we have a whole lot of resources, and maybe that's also why we have maybe a little bit more equipment than some places have, which is beneficial.
Yeah. I'm also aware that on this call, some of you are just on phone and not on video. And so we're actually kind of doing with each other. I mean, we're doing in this process kind of what we're talking about with clients. And so anyway, bottom line, thank you all for talking about that, because I was really wondering after talking with Greta this morning, what was going on with you guys with alternatives to treatment delivery as opposed to in the office face to face.
Well, thank you, Chris.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've got a few things on my mind, you know, that actually probably more than a few things, but anybody out there have something that they want to throw in the mix for us to chew on? Any questions, anything that's come up from last conversations we've had? Any challenges, victories? All right. So let me throw something out here, and I think some of you mentioned this. Speaking of phone, there's you know, one of the people I've worked with for a couple of years now, actually, maybe a year and a half, maybe it's going on 2 years now, is is a 70-year-old woman from another state, and she is she has interrupted the majority of her gambling. She would go to nearby casinos and play slot machines, really for the purpose of disappearing. Part of it, I think I may have shared this with you guys before. She was really angry when her husband retired from a company and bought a sailboat and spent 6 months or whatever it was sailing around the world while she was left at home. So her response was, screw you. If you can go take off and do that, then I'm going to go do what I want to do. And she also, it's one of those situations that you all run into where the only way that she felt like she could get his attention was to piss away some money at the casino. And so in a treatment process like that, it's identifying. I mean, we identified real early on what function her gambling served. It was to piss him off, to get his attention, and it worked. And it got her into treatment. But the other issue is the nature of the relationship. And I may have said this to you guys before. My academic specialization or focus was marriage and family therapy. And those of you who've been around for a while, in the early days, our goal was kind of like the Holy Grail, was to get the whole family together. I was in school in the late 70s. The pioneers in the field, we'd sit around in a circle and we'd watch Virginia Satir and Fritz Perls and Carl Whitaker and all the pioneers in the field of marriage and family therapy. We'd watch them work with a family, and we'd sit around and that's how we learned. So the Holy Grail was getting the whole family together. Then that's pretty difficult to do. It's been a long time since I've done that. And I don't know whether it's because I'm lazy or it's because people are much more spread out now, maybe for an intervention or something like that, where we get a lot of the family together. And maybe because my focus has been much more on the gambling side of things, and families have been scattered, and it just hasn't been practical. So then the fallback from that is hang on just a second. The fallback from that was to do couples therapy, obviously working with couples and seeing them face to face. Well, I got to the point, especially with the gambling and the volatility there, and working with sex addicts, sex addiction, that I love working with couples. It's a lot of fun, but there's also times where I believe it's contraindicated. And in the place that I am right now, I may be in a different place in a month or a year or so, is that with people who are in relationships, I do relationship therapy with the individual. And what I mean by that is I'm operating under the belief, and I think more than belief, I think a knowing that in the context of my relationship with whoever, but in my relationship, if I do me different, something different will happen. I mean, this is what I say to people. I say, look, if you do you different in the context of your relationship, I don't care what the relationship is, whether it's with your spouse, partner, kids, parents, boss, coworkers, whatever. If you do you different, something different is going to happen. And then I add this tag: it may be better, it may be worse, there may be no net change. And that's really both a philosophical, but also a practical foundation that I've been operating out of for quite a number of years yet, and I really believe that it's true. Now, what that does is to operate in that position and to challenge the people I'm working with to step into that place. Is it kind of cuts through this sense of victimization or helplessness or codependence, which says, well, you know, if my wife would only do this different, if my husband would do this different, then I can be, if somebody else changes, then I can be okay. I know I'm preaching to the choir with you guys, but just kind of underlining some things so that we can be more intentional about what we do. Well, anytime I'm waiting for somebody else to change, I'm in trouble. So what it does is it shifts the focus onto me and my own personal responsibility. All right, so that's a lead into situation where this wonderful woman that I've been working with for a couple of years has, for the most part, interrupted her gambling. Every now and then, maybe once every 3 months or so, she'll go back to the casino. She'll spend an hour there. She'll piss away a couple $100, and she'll walk out the door and say, well, that was a waste of time. Now, what's been interesting for me is my response. The last time she did that was 2 weeks ago. Well, what's happened is her husband was working out at their farm and fell, hit his head on some concrete, did some brain damage, and is 3 times, 3 times a week, they're making a drive into Chicago to one of the brain trauma places for him to do rehab. So she's been under extraordinary stress. And last time we talked, she said, I just said, fuck it. That's a quote. You know, I went to the casino, I spent an hour there, and then I left. Now, what I'm aware of is, and I was kind of paying attention to my response. And to be honest with you, my response was, okay, big deal. And we just named it. All right, so you went to the casino and you reminded yourself, or you asked yourself, why did I do that? But you did it. So it reminds me that, that just that foundational piece, and again, you guys have heard me say this over and over again, that's because it bears repeating, and it helps me to remember that with gambling, there is a winning side to the bet. And even though when we're working with problem gamblers, problem gambling, what we're working with is the losing side of the bet, the consequences of the losing side of the bet. But it's imperative that while we're working with the consequences of the losing side of the bet, we also keep one foot grounded in the reality that there is a winning side to the bet. Is this making sense to you guys so far? I know you guys are not. I know it does. And so the winning side of the bet for her was she's carrying tremendous amount of stress. She went to the casino to forget about all of that, to get away from it, and temporarily it worked. And so what that does is, for me, it certainly challenges my old historical position of complete abstinence. And I'm not taking a position of supporting her going or not going. My position is, look, it's your life. You can do what you want to. But I got to thinking about this in the context of our conversation, and the word harm reduction comes into the picture. I certainly think that, it could be argued that what we've done for her is arguably gotten to a place because of her consciousness of her gambling. No, she can't go to the casino and gamble without knowing what it is that she's doing. Now, she may say, screw it, I'm going to do it anyway. But, it's that old thing that was from AA. They say, if you come to our meetings, you may not stop drinking, but we'll damn sure screw it up for you. And so I think that's, that's part of my goal in working with addicts, with gamblers, is knowing that I am powerless over your addiction. And it's not my job to stop you from gambling. I'm not going to take responsibility for your life. What I am going to do is whatever I can to help screw it up for you. And what I mean by that is that I screw it up for you when I invite you to step out of the lie into the truth, where I invite you to tell yourself the whole story, which, by the way, is what addicts do when they're in recovery. When an addict says, I thought about going to the casino, and I told myself, well, if I go, I might win, but it doesn't matter because even if I win, then I'm going to go back and I can't stop, and so on and so forth. You guys know the drill. So that's really our job. And what she reminded me of is that there is a winning side to the bet. And personally, when I hear going to the casino, to be honest with you, there's a part of me that says, oh shit, but also take it seriously, but not that seriously. Now, if it begins to escalate, then we got a different issue. So the issue of harm reduction, I know that's been a big piece of a lot of training in our field, and my response to that historically is as a goal. I personally am not interested in anybody hurting themselves a little bit less. Having said that, I also recognize that for somebody to go and gamble and not do as much damage might be a good thing. But then on the other hand, that brings me inside of myself, both as an internal issue and then as a practical issue working with people, is that what I know and what I keep getting invited to remember is that, unfortunately, for most addicts, unless and until there's enough pain, then the addict, whether it's me or you as a recovering addict or the people we're working with, honestly is not going to do anything different. And that gets into the age-old question, well, can we help raise the bottom? Well, of course. And it's not that I'm masochistic or anything like that, but what I know is that unless until, for most of us, unless and until we experience enough pain from the consequence of the losing side of the bet, we're not going to do what it takes in order to get well. So, yeah, I'll be honest with you. I've got what seems to be a bit of an internal struggle with the whole idea of harm reduction, even though I know that what we do is we take people where they are, and reducing harm along the way, according to one lens, can be a good thing, but I also don't want to get in the way of people experiencing the consequences of their own actions to the point that they feel enough pain in order to motivate themselves to do what they need to do in order to change their lives. Now, the challenge with that is, and I'll share this with you guys, there's another case. There's a college kid that I work with who frequents the card rooms here in Austin. And he got to me because he'd gotten into a lot of trouble, as a college kid who doesn't have any income, owed $30,000 or $40,000 to people who had lent him money, at the card rooms, and then threatened him and that sort of thing. So his mama comes in and bails him out. And of course, he keeps gambling. Then he stopped for a while, and over the summer, he started going back. So I saw him last week. And what I decided to do with him was to put aside any need that I had for him to stop gambling, because I recognized that that he hadn't lost anything yet. And I think that's a question that we have to ask for anybody we're working with who's got a gambling problem, is what have you lost? Where's your source of pain? And it's it's imperative that that we invite them to identify what their problem is. It's less important. My diagnosis of their problem is less important than their own diagnosis of their problem. So this kid comes in last week and he says, yeah, I went back to the card room. And I said, okay, what happened? And he deadpans it. You know, he's got his poker face on. And what we were working toward was, okay, if you're going to gamble, you know, it's not my job to take a position of you know, you can or can't gamble. That's not my call at all. My position is, and I've said this to him, look, I don't, you know, whether you gamble or not, that's up to you. You know, the reason, you know, my reason for being here with you is to do what I can to help you be conscious of how it is that you decide to do what you decide to do when you decide to do it, so that you're not on autopilot when you're gambling consciously. And personally, if I can do that, then I think I've been successful, because again, he's not somebody who has said, I never want to gamble again. So, okay, I'll take that at face value. So again, what I'm saying is I have to put aside any need or want or desire on my part for this person to forsake his gambling, except that's where he is. So he comes in, last week, sits on the couch, and, you know, I said, okay, what happened? He said, well, you know, I did okay. I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, I'm sticking with the $200 that I take in each time. And, you know, if I lose that, I'll leave. And of course, he hadn't been losing. He's been winning. So he turned his $200 into $18,000, which he has sitting in a shoebox over at the house. Now you guys tell me, what's the problem there? You know, why does this kid, now his mom doesn't know he's still gambling. And my belief is, although I don't know this, is when I see him again in a few weeks, he may have run this $18,000 into $100,000, or he may have given it all back. But if he does, that's more information. So what that reminded me of again is the power of the winning side of the bet that you and I as clinicians working with gamblers ignore at our own peril and at the peril of our clients. And is this just making sense to you guys so far? Any feedback from any of you? Means you'd have to log on to your mic or something like that, but
Sounds good to me.
Yeah, go ahead.
I just said, sounds good to me. I appreciate all that you're saying.
All right, is it making sense to you, Carol?
Yes.
You know, and I think this, again, it you know, I mean, I know this stuff, you know, I know it better in the back of my hand, but it's one of those pieces that I still have to get reminded of, that how incredibly seductive this stuff is. Now, having said that, I was reading this morning, I was reading an old article that Dr. Custer was being quoted in. I don't know, it was either the Washington Post or something from 1984. And so Bob said, he said, the real losing phase starts with the big win. That's the hook. All right, now we all know that. That's kind of gambling training 101. Now, what's been modified since 1984, the majority of the gamblers that Bob worked with in 1984, that was before the expansion of the casinos, clearly, were mostly male action-seeking gamblers. And a lot of the gambling was illegal. You know, unless somebody had been in Las Vegas or Atlantic City, you know, or horse racing, it was illegal. So he's talking a particular type of gambling. So the big win that he's referring to, and he even defined the big win he put a number to it, is the equivalent of 2 or 3 times one's monthly salary. He actually put a number to that. You know, I know if he were still alive today, Bob died in 1990, 1991, you know, he would certainly modify that, because today I think the big win is, and I think the definition that I've come up with, the big win is any number that I have in my head that is enough to either solve whatever problem that I have, or that will put me on easy street. You know, whatever that, and then everybody's going to have a different number. Now, with the expansion of casino gambling, the movement toward the machines, the different type, the escape gambling, the big win for this woman in another state was simply going to the casino. You know, what she wanted to do was win enough money just to keep playing. All right, you guys know all of this. So what we've done is we've changed the definition of the big win, but it's still the same. That's the hook. So he says the big win, the real losing phase starts with the big win. He also went on to say, he said, I've never met a social gambler who had a big win in that sense. Now, that does not mean that there are people who would be classified as social gamblers that may not have placed a bet and won, but the meaning that they ascribe to that winning is, man, I got lucky. That was once 1 in a million or whatever it was. It's not going to happen again. I'm going to take my money and go home and not go back, right? That's somebody who is grounded in that reality. But the big win for somebody who has a problem is it fuels that delusion, that fantasy, and that reality that says, if I've done it once, I can do it again. So the hook is the big win, but he says what locks them in is the bailout. So with anybody that you're working with who is gambling, it is necessary, and remember, bailout is the word that enabling is the word that we use with substance abuse. Bailout is the word that we use with gambling, which involves enabling, but it's actually more than that. The bailout can come in a number of different ways. For this kid who had gotten into trouble, you know, told his mom he wasn't going to gamble. She's doing some oversight with his money and that sort of thing. It's all set up. When he goes in and through his play, he turns $200 into $18,000. I would submit to you that he has bailed himself out. What he's doing is reinforcing for himself. And I've got to accept the proposition that he might be correct, because there is the classification, there is the category of professional gamblers. There are people who gamble regularly and do make money. They walk away with their winnings. They know when to hold them, know when to fold them. And the big question is, can somebody who has crossed the line into problem gambling ever get back across? And we know the literature says that's the great dream or delusion of every problem gambler, to gamble normally. It's the great dream of every alcoholic to be able to drink normally. We know that. We also know that clearly sometimes there are people who manage to get back across that line and stay there. I don't know whether that's going to be true with this kid, but what I can tell you that experiences like that, I'm mostly used to people coming in who have, you know, lost big, and they're hurting from the losing and various things. When you got somebody coming in and they've won big, that poses a different kind of problem. And you got to ask yourself then, okay, so, you know, what do I do as a clinician? Well, again, my default position is my job is to not stop you from gambling. That's not my response, or encourage you to. It's to simply help you become conscious of what it is that you're doing, so that then you exercise your own choice and you experience either the reward or the consequences. Remember, it's with gambling, we say that what distinguishes it from all the other addictions is the reality that it's the only addiction, at least that I'm aware of, whereby you can engage in the addiction and solve problems created by the addiction. That's another way of saying you can place the next bet and win. Now, what he did with some of the money that he won was he paid off the debts from the last time. So he cleaned the slate, wiped it clean. And when he did that, then what he's doing is he's reinforcing for himself that says, you know, if I go in there in a controlled way and I stay within my game, then I'm a good enough player. I mean, this guy knows all the math, all the laws of probability. He's kind of one of those guys that's dialed in. And if I do that, then I can win. And you know what? He's probably right. But there's a meta wager, and that's one of the things that he and I have talked about and just named. And the meta wager is this. I'll bet I can go in and gamble in a controlled way and walk out in a controlled way. And what we simply say is that's an open wager. So that's what I mean by a meta wager. You know, as I'm betting on myself to be able to gamble in a different way. All right, so again, one of the reasons that I'm sharing this with you guys is that if we and to me this is not harm reduction. That's not my goal. I don't have a different word for it, but my goal again is to help you be conscious of what it is that you're doing, and then what you choose to do is what you choose to do. That's my goal. That's my purpose as a clinician. Also, I want you to be well. I've got my own beliefs about gambling and even for somebody that's winning and the damage that it does. But that's just me. So I've got instances here, just kind of in my week, where I've got a woman going in. Wins by going to the casino and then feels somewhat bad afterwards, but like she said, it worked. I don't, I know it's not a great thing to do, but you know what? I went and she's under tremendous stress and she had some freedom from that. I can't deny that reality. Can't deny that. I'm not jumping on that side. I'm not jumping on the other side. I can't deny that reality. This other kid walks in and turns $200 into $18,000. Cannot deny that reality. And so again, it gets to that question of how do we work with this? And I think that my challenge to myself and my challenge to you guys continually is to recognize that our job really is to be present to other people, to give them the gift of our presence and to find out what it is, what do they want? What do they understand the problem is? And our job is to simply, is to hold up a mirror or be a tape recorder and reflect back to them what it is that we're hearing, what it is that we're seeing. And at the same time, I also believe part of my function is to recognize where people are stuck, to help identify where they're stuck, the binds that they're in, and then to call them forth. All right, so let me pause for a second, take a sip of water and see if anybody's got any thoughts or reflections or whether it stirs anything or whether I'm just talking nonsense here. Anybody? Raul, talk to me.
Yes, it makes a whole lot of sense, Chris.
Okay, what do you hear?
I am with you, and what I'm hearing here is my my brain gear is just working overdrive here, and then that just reflecting that sometimes I work too hard to really wanting making them understand they need to stop.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I do that too. And, I mean, that's where I tend to, and part of it is it's out of compassion. I mean, you know that, I mean, you can see that what they're doing is harmful to themselves, right?
And other people, yeah.
And other people.
Right.
And so it's an interesting dance that we do between being responsible and accountable to ourselves, but also to our clients or patients, and at the same time recognize that it is also their life, and it's important for us to honor that, and that I'm responsible for delivering the best care that I can, but I'm not responsible for you unless somehow you're so impaired that, you know, I've been invested with guardianship or that sort of thing. So it's an interesting dance that we do in our profession. But
Yes.
I'm hearing you at times you get caught up emotionally in this energy of wanting them to be in a different place than they are.
Stop the pain, yes.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think we get confronted with that all the time. I mean, there's another kid that I've been working with who's finally, for the first time, he checked into a 45-day treatment program. This is one of the craziest gamblers I've ever worked with. Actually, somebody that I mean, you all know the name Richard Rosenthal. Richard's a good friend of mine who's a psychiatrist in California who is co-author of the DSM-4 diagnostic criteria for pathological gambling, along with Henry Lessier. And, you know, I've had Richard working with him on the medical side of things, and man, nothing we have done has worked. And I've been working with this kid since he was, I think, 18, and he's 26 now. So 8 years. And it's been an incredible exercise for me in patience and trust, and recognizing that, I mean, every time he would kind of get close to saying, you know, I don't know what to do, I need help, my head's exploding with panic attacks, and this is a kid that if he had $50,000, he'd go blow it in 30 minutes at the casino. You know, he can't get rid of money fast enough. Comes from a family where there's been plenty of money to bail him out, with a father who's rather famous that, you know, he can't live up to. And I've been waiting for the day where he would be ready to do whatever it takes, whatever it takes, in order to be well. So finally, he's in a 45-day treatment program, and he said some interesting things to me. He said, okay, hang on one second, guys. Let me take a breath here. 1 second. Okay. What he said to me was, he said, you know, when I go there, he said, I know what I'm going to do. I said, what's that? He said, well, as soon as I get there, as soon as I get there, I'm going to start figuring out a way to get out. You know, I'm going to play a game. You know, I said, well, yeah, you can do that. I mean, it's your life. You can do that. You know, so on the one hand, I affirm. I said, now what you can do with that, if you want, is tell them when you get there that that's what you're going to do. So you don't have to, you know, but you can tell them that that's what you're going to do. And I went on to say, I said, man, I want you to be well. And my challenge to you is to be willing to do whatever they suggest, whatever they ask. And so the big question is, I'm guessing I'll hear from them tomorrow, because he checked in on Sunday. Last treatment program he went into, he lasted a day and a half. before he got out of there. So, I'm waiting to see whether, whether he'll stick it out. And I don't know whether he will or whether he won't. He was in a tremendous amount of pain. But what he taught me was, once again, that he had to be in a place where his level of desperation was sufficient for him to do something that he said he didn't want to do or wouldn't do. That's the hitting the bottom that we refer to.
Right.
Also talking with a guy this afternoon who had 18 years in AA, sober. He was Mr. AA in his area, and he's been using crack for the last year. Went in a couple of detox for a week, did that a couple times, went into a 40, 30, or 45-day program and came out and kept using. And the problem is that he has plenty of money, very successful. He's in the middle of a divorce, has two young daughters, a wife, soon to be former wife, who's also an addict in recovery. And it's only now that she's starting to call him to accountability legally, like saying you can't see the kids until you do, until you do a UA and that sort of thing. And I'm thinking, what took you so long? Now, what's interesting is, in the order, he told me this Tuesday, he said, well, he said they're in this agreement, they're wanting me to see a different therapist in Chicago because they said you weren't doing any good. And I said, they're right about that. But it also struck me in that was that until he had enough pain, or until he had enough consequences, then he wasn't going to do anything different. And so again, we walk that line. When we're with somebody, we see them in pain, and the amount of pain and damage that gamblers can inflict on themselves and others is obviously extraordinary. But until there is enough pain, most people are not going to do whatever it is that they need to do and be well. And again, that challenges us. Can we tolerate it? It raises the question is, can I as a person, can I as a clinician be in a place where I can tolerate your pain? Or do I need to get in and intervene and get in the way and help you less pain? And I think that's a question that each one of us has to ask ourselves on somewhat a regular basis. I think you guys have heard me talk about this because it's it's an invitation. What I know is that that's why it's critical for me to be aware of my own, what's going on with me personally. And if I've got something going on in my life that is disturbing or painful, it may be unresolved, then what I know is that my tolerance to be present to you in the midst of your pain is challenged. I was going to say impaired. I don't know that that's true, because if I acknowledge it to myself, then I'm okay. But if I'm not okay with that, or excuse me, if I'm not aware of my own level of my own discomfort in my own personal life when I'm talking to you on the phone or when I'm sitting across from you in the office, then it's going to get in the way. If I'm conscious of it, then oftentimes what I do say, I just turn that into prayer and say, God, I'm in some pain about this. And so, I'm just naming that, handing that over so I can be present. So again, what I'm saying to you guys is that when we're dealing with people in a lot of pain, which is what we do, our constant question is, because they're coming in the door, by the way, saying, I'm in pain, get me out of pain. I mean, I saw my Pilates instructor yesterday. I've got chronic lower back pain, And man, she put me through the ringer. So I'm walking through her door saying, I'm in pain. I want to be free from my physical pain, or I want to have it at least mitigated. So I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But what I am saying is that raises an interesting question for us, a tension that we live with, and that people walk through our door saying, I'm hurting, I don't want to hurt. And there's a part of us that says, okay, let me help you not hurt. And yet the reality is that the way to not hurt is to clear out all that is in the way of me actually feeling the full reality of the pain that is already there, so that I can tap into that, so that I have that as a gift, as the motivation for me to do my life different. And so that's the other thing we do. We clean out the brush. Yes.
The thought I had was the way my brain translated what you're saying is we need to not provide emotional bailouts to our client in the session.
Thank you. Yes, exactly. And it's easy to say that conceptually, but you and I both know that sometimes sometimes we do that. And you know what? There's a difference between emotional bailouts and saying, look, your life can be different. You don't have to live with the pain that you're living with. And usually the pain I'm talking about is the pain that we create, the suffering that we create as a function of running from the real pain, right? And so, yeah, you're absolutely correct that that I think it's necessary that we pay attention to whether or not we unknowingly, unwittingly are emotionally bailing out our clients, our patients. And I think that's a question that's kind of always got to be kind of front of mind, front awareness for all of us. Now, what's interesting in that is that right after I finish this, I'm seeing a kid for the first time. Haven't met him. I talked to him once on the phone, but I've been exchanging conversations with his father. And this I say he's a kid. He's in his late 20s, I think. And clearly he's got a gambling problem. There's been a history of mom and dad bailing him out financially. And he's supposed to be getting married next spring, and his fiance doesn't know about his gambling. He's been supposed to call me for 2 months, and it was only when we set things up with his dad, and it was interesting because his dad said, he said, it's hard for me to stand by and watch him marry this wonderful girl, knowing that my son has not told her the truth about his gambling. And so in conversations with his dad, what I did was say, well, so you're in a bind. And the bind that you're telling me that you're in, so I did reframe it a little bit, is that you're wondering whether, in other words, you have a secret that you're carrying on behalf of your son that you don't want to carry, but you're carrying this knowledge and watching him walk into this marriage living a lie. And you don't want to do that. He said, exactly. He said, I want him to tell her. I said, okay, so here's my suggestion is that and this is a variation of a bind that a lot of parents or spouses or anybody else is in with respect to gamblers. I said, so here's you asked me for my suggestion, so here it is that you tell your son, look, I know that you have not told your fiance the truth about your gambling. And I'm sitting here knowing that, and I'm watching you go through with that, and that creates a bind for me. So what I want you to know is whether or not you're going to tell her the truth. Because if you're not going to tell her the truth, then I will. You know? And so you take the bind and you throw it back on the individual. And so, that's part of what happens. So this guy's coming in to see me, and we'll see what happens. I've seen some of his emails, and what I know is that he's probably somebody who doesn't trust in his ability to provide for himself. He's been used to getting bailed out. So it goes back to what Bob Custer said was, he said, what locks them in is the bailout. And what happens is when you start talking to a gambler or to those support, that enabling that bailout network about turning off the money supply, then that creates a crisis of a different sort. But that's a crisis that we want. And it's one that has to be managed. So what I'm also saying to you, you guys, is that, and I know you do this, but just as a reminder to all of us, is I love talking about the psychological dynamics of gambling and the polarities, the win, loss, the all or nothing, all the delusion, the fantasy world, the lying. But we also have to stay very firmly grounded in the reality of the movement of the money. Where's the money coming from that you're using to gamble with? And maybe you all asked that. It's part of what we do, and it's to me it's more fun, to focus on the kind of deeper underlying issues. But please do not ignore the flow of money. When I do a legal case, what I tell the lawyers is, look, I'll talk to the person, but what really tells the story is the money trail. And because in a sense the money trail doesn't lie. The gambler's lying, but the money trail doesn't lie. So anyway, just a little sidebar, a little plug there to encourage you guys to make sure that you are following the money trail. And along those lines, remember our old adage is the more vague somebody stays, the more disconnected from reality. The more specific they are, the closer to reality. And so when people say, I lost a lot of money, your question is exactly how much.
Right.
Right. So again, just a reminder, specifically how much, specifically, that's one of your phrases to use, is specifically how much, specifically when, and you're going to run into some resistance on that. But again, if I can stay vague, then I'm bullshitting myself first. I'm lying, which is one of the diagnostic criteria. First to myself and then to you. And so we want to get at the truth. Okay. Anybody else before we pull the plug on today? I feel like I'm kind of doing a radio show with a little bit of call in here. So, all right, you guys good?
I'm good.
Right, you guys are doing great work. Yeah, who?
This is Carol. Thank you.
Hey, Carol. Okay, great. Thanks for your feedback. Great being with you guys. Look forward to next month. Take care. Have a great
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Okay.